What's up guys, and welcome to the second part of the two-part surgery guide. I won't keep you waiting any longer. Let's get straight into it. Alright, here we are at another interesting scenario. This is high temperature combined with rapidly climbing fever. This is the start scenario. This means your patient has bird flu. You don't need to use any ultrasound for this. But what you need to make sure of is, as soon as you see this, start by getting the antibiotics ready. That's the only thing you need to do, because in 2 turns your patient's temperature will be too high, because a rapidly climbing temperature means your patient will gain about 2 degrees in temperature each turn. So you only have 1 turn to get your antibiotics ready. So immediately use the lab kit, get the antibiotics ready. As you can see, the temperature is 110. It's in a red. It's just very dangerous. So straight away use the antibiotics. Now, there is a very small chance that you get a skill fail in this scenario, which is very annoying. There's nothing you can do about it. That's the only way you can fail this. Now, just use the antibiotics, keep using them, keep using them, keep using them, and you're done. That's all you need to do. It's the cheapest one you can get, but it's also very dangerous, as you can get a skill fail. Alright, here again, we are at a very easy one. It's simply a broken arm. I already clicked on the ultrasound a second ago because I wasn't aware of it being a broken arm. But all you need to do is, when you get broken arm, is start with an ultrasound, so you figure out what the issue is, you use a splint, and then after that the patient is still bleeding, so you use stitches. That's all you need to do. It's the cheapest one you can get, combined with the flu one. It's very easy. You don't have to cut into the patient, so don't. Just use a splint, then use a stitch, and you're done. Alright, so earlier we had the monkey flu. The monkey flu starts at a temperature of 107.4. And this is most likely the bird flu. The bird flu starts at a temperature of 101.6, but also with a rapidly climbing fever. Once again, if you get this, immediately use the lab kit and just start spamming antibiotics, because the bird flu rises with about 4 degrees every turn, meaning once again, in 2 turns, your patient is dead unless you start using antibiotics. So use the lab kit straight away. As you can see, turtle flu, my bad, turtle flu. As you can see straight away, it's shown to be turtle flu. The temperature has risen with like 4 degrees and the patient's fever is still climbing rapidly. Use antibiotics immediately. Keep using them, and you're done. It's very easy. Just make sure that you start off correctly, because the first item you use is the most important item with any flu. Make sure you use the correct one and you'll be fine. Don't always immediately start with the ultrasound. Some people are like, oh, I'll start with the ultrasound because I don't know what the issue is. Don't do that. Look at the problem, predict what the issue is. If you see the rapidly climbing fever, always fix the rapidly climbing fever first. That's your #1 priority. Same with heavy bleeding. If you see a large amount of blood loss, start with stitches to fix the blood loss. Don't start with the ultrasound. Always fix the red issues first. Alright, here's another interesting issue. This is quite easy, the word lock. I've already showed you this at the start. But the special part about this is the patient exhibits very tough skin. Possibly a superhero. This means that whenever you cut into the patient with your scalpel, as you can see, oh, hard stop, you require 1 extra cut. Because usually the word lock you will find after 2 cuts. In this case, you will find it after 3 cuts, because of it being a superhero with tough skin. So keep that in mind. As well as when a superhero has broken bones or shattered bones, you need 2 cuts in order to start using the pins. Not 1 cut. Usually it's 1 cut for pins. With superheroes, it's 2 cuts for pins. Now, we can fix it as usual. It's coming to, so let's put it back to sleep. There's a lot of stuff happening at once. Just calm down. The anesthetics got a skill fail and a heart stopped as well. In this scenario, focus on a heart stop first. Then when the heart is beating again, put the patient back to sleep. Alright? So we use a sponge. We start the heart. And we got a skill fail as well. This is very unlucky. We got a bunch of skill fails at once. This sometimes happens. You can't do anything against it. So you failed your patient, right? So what happens when you fail a surgery? You get a malpractice mod. Now, what the malpractice mod does is it denies you from doing surgery for 1 entire hour. There is a way to prevent this, which is using, where are they? The legal briefs. Okay, there we go. These are legal briefs. Legal briefs are quite expensive. They're about 20 word looks each, so I would not suggest using them. I was just waiting an hour, but for the sake of the video, I will use them. Now, what it does is it simply removes your malpractice mod. when you equip it. The item will disappear, and your malpractice mod will also disappear. Malpractice is very annoying, but it's very easily fixed. Just wait an hour. Here's also an interesting one. I actually didn't notice it, but this is a patient with antibiotic-resistant infection, meaning the temperature lowers at a slightly faster level when using antibiotics. So basically, antibiotics have a less large effect. So that means you need to use more antibiotics in order to lower the patient's temperature. It's not an issue, but just keep in mind that in this case, you need to use antibiotics quicker than with a normal patient. So rather than using it when it's in the red, use it when it's in the orange. All right, simple as that. So now we can simply check what the patient did. The issue is the appendix. Cut it open. See, besides the antibiotics difference, there's no difference in the surgery itself, and boom, it's fixed. Easy as that. All right, here's a good example of the superhero issue with shattered bones. This is a very difficult one because it's the run over by a truck combined with shattered bones. As you can see, when we put the patient to sleep and we cut him open, we cannot use the what's it called? Pins yet. We can no longer we cannot use the pins yet. So we need to do an extra cut in order to use the pins. So now we can start using the pins. Keep in mind, oh, skill fell, that the pulse is still lowering. So halfway through using the pins, use a transfusion, so the pulse becomes steady again. Oh, heart stopped. See, it's like you can get very unlucky at some points, but if you just keep calm and read what's happening, you can complete 99 of 100 surgeries just fine, as long as you don't make mistakes yourself. See, temperature is high, so we use our lab kit. Alright, this is a difficult scenario because we have both an extremely weak pulse and an extremely high temperature, as well as it's becoming harder to see your workplace. This means you need to make a decision between stitches, antibiotics, or transfusion. Now, which one is smarter to use? Antibiotics will reduce the temperature, but you will most likely not be able to see your working place next turn because of the extreme blood loss. So that's not really a good decision because that means the person will die of blood loss. You can use transfusion, but because the blood is still being lost at the same amount, at the same speed, you will no longer be able to see the site. You're forced to use a sponge, and in that time, the person will die of temperature. So I would suggest using stitches. Now, it's very risky because even though you make either one of the decisions, the patient will probably still die. It is simply unlucky. It is the smartest decision in this case because you have the highest chance of surviving. So let's use stitches and hope we can still see the site. If not, we're probably dead. All right, so we can still see the site, and we've stitched up an incision, meaning we have less blood loss. This means that the pulse is probably strong enough to survive one more turn, meaning we now need to choose between stitches, antibiotics, and transfusion. Again, like I said, using the antibiotics will probably make sure that we can no longer see the site. Transfusion will have the same issue once again. If we use stitches, we reduce the incisions from 1 to 0, meaning the pulse will no longer lower, so the pulse will still stay the same, as well as our sight on the operation, because we can only lose sight of operation when there is blood loss. So if you use stitches one more time, we should have a temperature of 110, meaning we can still use antibiotics. The pulse should no longer be lowered because we no longer have blood loss, as well as we will still be able to see the site. So let's use one stitch. Yeah, perfect. As you can see, we're no longer losing blood. The pulse is still extremely weak, but we are no longer losing pulse. And the temperature is not too high yet. So now we can use our antibiotics. So we've lowered the temperature. We can use your transfusion to increase the pulse. And we can use antibiotics until our temperature is low enough. And we can use transfusion until our pulse is strong again. We were in a very critical situation. A lot of people would lose. But if you just follow the system I just learned you will survive. Trust me, you will be able to, your patient will survive. Trust me. Just follow it carefully and you'll be fine. Now, we look at the issues. It's becoming hard to see our work, so let's just use a sponge to be sure. We can put the patient back to sleep. We'll use a scalpel, 2, because it's superhero. We use our pins. Now we can choose to close up the patient or do one more cut to get the gravel out. I would suggest using one more cut right now, otherwise you'll be using a lot of extra stitches. Plus our pulse is still stronger, the temperature is still strong as well. So we use one more cut, we use our sponge, we fix it, we put our patient back to sleep. Now we're in a bad scenario because the scale fell and heart stopped at the same time. That's always unlucky. So let's see if we can get ourselves out of this issue. We use a defibrillator, patient is woken up. We use our antiseptics, we use our sponge, we close the patient up. There we go. We use antibiotics, then we use broken bones. The splint stick fixed broken bones, and we've won the most difficult scenario ever. And we got a wolf whistle, which is great, which is like 15 woodlocks. So as you can see, you can win almost any scenario as long as you're not very unlucky with scale fells. As difficult as it might seem. So just keep calm and just read what's happening on the screen. And if you're confused, go back to the video and see how I did it, because it's doable. See, what just happened is what I'm trying to tell you is we have the flu issue and we use the lab kit, but because we get a scale file of 1%, we can no longer save the patient. There's nothing we can do about. I used the lab kit, we got a scale file, our temperature is now 110. In order to lower the temperature, we need to use antibiotics, but in order to use the antibiotics, we need to use our lab kit. So I click lab kit and the patient dies because the temperature got too high. It's very unfortunate, but there's nothing we can do about it. Alright, here's the nose job. The nose job is really easy. You simply put the patient to sleep, you cut open the nose, you fix the nose, and you stitch it back up. Simple as that. It's very easy, very cheap. Just follow this. Alright, here we have the hemophiliac. Basically what the hemophiliac means is a faster loss of blood. So when you have the hemophiliac, make sure you almost never have blood loss, because blood loss on a hemophiliac is very dangerous. Here we are. Alright, we have another, we have a massive trauma. I've been looking for this for a while to show you guys, because this is the only one I haven't showed you yet. Besides that, we've covered all different surgery scenarios. The massive trauma always starts off with using a sponge. So let's start off using a sponge. Then we use our ultrasound to actually figure out that it is a trauma. Alright, so next up we need to look at the issues at hand. So we're currently losing blood, then we have broken bones, and we have shattered bones. I always fix blood loss by using stitches. But in this case, the blood loss is not extreme and the pulse is still steady. So what I usually do is first I put the patient to sleep. I make one quick cut, use the pins, stitch it back up. Oh, we have a hard stop. Here's an issue, because here's a very common scenario as well, which can be fixed if you just look at the mechanics. Basically, we have an extremely weak pulse with blood loss and a stopped heart. So now you need to make the decisions. Do I use a stitch? Do I use the defibrillator, or do I use a transfusion? Now, transfusion you can use, but in that case, the pulse will go up a little bit, but you also lose blood at the same time. So the pulse will not change, and the heart will stop in the turn. Well, the patient will die the turn after that because the heart has stopped. So that doesn't work. If you use the defibrillator, that's fine. The heart will be back up, but because the pulse is already extremely weak and the patient is still losing blood, the patient will die of blood loss. That doesn't work. So what we can do is use a stitch. What using a stitch does is decrease the incisions to 0, meaning we will no longer have a loss of pulse, and also not a loss of blood, which is good. And we have one extra turn to get the heart back up, because the patient will only die from a stopped heart after 2 turns, not the turn immediately after it stopped. So what we can do right now is use one stitch. There's no longer an incision, so we're no longer losing blood. This site is no longer becoming dirty, and we're no longer losing pulse, and we can still use our defibrillator. As you can see, we're back on a good scenario. We can use our transfusions to get back to a strong pulse. We can use our antibiotics to get back to a good temperature, and we can use the splints to fix the broken bones. From this point on, the trauma is quite easy, because all you need to do is fix the punctured lung and you're done. So we put the patient back to sleep, we cut the patient back open, we fix the punctured lung, we use the sponge to fix the site, and we're done. So the trauma doesn't have to be difficult necessarily, but you do need to make sure that you look at all the problems that are happening at once. Alright, so we're here at the end, and you're probably wondering, what exactly does the stethoscope do? Well, what the stethoscope does, it reduces the chance of skill fails by half. It's very good. So rather than having a 6% chance of a skill fail, I only have a 3% of a skill fail. The stethoscopes are very expensive. I bought it for, I think it was 5.5 diamond blocks, and during this event it's probably double that. So I would not suggest buying it. What you can also do is use tea. Tea is a consumable which you can buy for like 100 for a world lock, and it has the exact same effect as the stethoscope and lasts 1 minute per tea. So you can do 1 or 2 surgeries per tea. So in order to do 200 surgeries, you need like 150 teas. It's very easy and not too expensive, like 1.5 world locks. So I would suggest using those as well. These were all the scenarios I showed you. If you have any questions or if you think I missed a scenario, please let me know in the comments. I hope you enjoyed. Once more, like I said, the Exquisite site is most likely the best site to use, or at least to my opinion, because it reduces the amount of tools you need. And yeah, thank you for watching, and see you next time.